For more on China's economy, we're joined live by Sung Won Sohn. He's an economist and professor at California State University. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
So, Doctor, 6.9%. The IMF had predicted 6.8% for the third quarter. It is the slowest growth since 2009, but still higher than forecast. What is your take?
Well, it is pretty close to the government target of 7%. So I don't think we should be splitting hair. We all know that economic growth has been slowing, and I think China is on the way to a soft landing.
Last week, you spoke to my colleague, Michelle McCory, about this very story. You said that the bigger story, though, here is that China is rebalancing the composition and that its economic growth will become more consumption-driven. Can you explain for us what you meant by that?
Yes. In the past, the economic growth came significantly from investments in infrastructure, cement, steel factories, and real estate. And in hindsight, those investments were too large. China is in the process of scaling back those investments, and that's one of the reasons why we are seeing a economic slowdown, especially in real estate investment, even though government is pumping up infrastructure investments. At the same time, the government is trying to boost consumption, education, recreation, all the services-related consumption as well. And so the composition is changing in the direction the government wants, and I think in the long run, this is a desirable direction. We do not want to see China relying too much on real estate or exports.
President Xi Jinping mentioned in a recent interview that the slowdown is also stemming from weak global growth. Should China worry more about domestic demand or international demand?
I think both. However, domestic economic slowdown is more of a concern for the global economy. After all, in the last 10 years or so, China has been the locomotive of pulling the world economy forward and upward. So many countries, such as including Brazil, Indonesia, India, all these countries are suffering from economic growth slowdown as a result of what's happening in China. But I think President Xi is right that we have a global economic slowdown. Europe and Japan are not growing very much, and also the United States is not growing all that rapidly either. So, but again, from the global perspective, the economic slowdown in China, that is a major concern.
Unemployment was up slightly in September. Is this mainly due to the graduation season? How is Beijing's effort to encourage young people to start their own businesses? How is that effort doing?
I think that is going well. We want young people to start new businesses. Like we see in Silicon Valley, for example, there are a lot of young people starting new businesses, and that represents innovations, a new spark, underlying fire in the economy. So I think in the long run, this is very important, and then we are seeing some of that in China, and I am pleased about that.
Looking ahead, some economists are suggesting that China set its growth target at 6.5% or lower for the next 5 years. What are your thoughts on that?
I think China's economic growth will slow. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes below 6.5 to something closer to 5%. Let us not forget the fact that China's economy is not a young economy anymore. It's been growing very nicely, and as the economy continues to grow, naturally the rate of growth will slow down. As you know, in the United States, for example, so-called the potential economic growth rate is about 2 to 2.5%, and it would be impossible for the U.S. economy to grow anything close to 5 or 6%. I think the same can be applied to China. Chinese economy is beginning to mature, and that's one of the reasons why the growth rate is slowing. So I think we could see economic growth rate in the next 2 to 3 years slowing down perhaps to 5 to 5.5% in that range.
All right, Dr. Sung Won Sohn, thank you so much for joining us from Los Angeles.
Thank you.